Today's story is called The Lion and the Mouse. A lion, asleep in his lair, was woken up by a mouse running over his face. Losing his temper, he seized it with his paw and was about to kill it. The mouse, terrified, piteously entreated him to spare its life. "Please let me go," it cried. That's my best Mickey Mouse. "And one day I'll repay you for any kindness." Was that pretty good? I'm terrible at impressions. That felt all right. Oh boy. The idea of so insignificant a little creature ever being able to do anything for him amused the lion so much that he laughed aloud. You have to laugh. Like a lion. That was weird. But the mouse's chance came after all. Oh, sorry. He was so amused he let the mouse go. And then the mouse's chance came after all. One day, the lion got entangled in a net which had been spread for game by some hunters. And the mouse heard and recognized his roars of anger. Can anybody do a lion roar? That was awesome. The mouse ran right to the spot, and without more ado, it set to work to gnaw the ropes with its teeth, and before long succeeded in setting the lion free. "There," said the mouse. "You laughed at me when I promised I would repay you, but now you see, even a mouse can help a lion." No act of kindness. I really debated if I should do the mouse voice, but I went for it. No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. That's a good story. You know the moral of a story like that. Mercy is a good thing. Showing mercy is a good thing. Jesus talked about that. The apostles talked about that. I think Jesus elevated that principle in Matthew 25, which is going to be our main text a little bit later. But before we get to that, I want to quote my favorite verse in all of the Bible. If I'm allowed to have a favorite, it would be James 2:13. "Judgment is without mercy to one who has shown no mercy, but mercy triumphs over judgment." The literal Greek word is conquers. Mercy conquers judgment, which is supposed to be a funny play on words in Greek. You would think that judgment is what conquers someone, because that's the way that word is used in Greek. You judge someone, and that judgment is held over the person. And they flip it around in James. He says, no, mercy is what holds over judgment's head, the victory. So the idea here is that you think judgment is what will bring about the conclusion you're looking for, all right? But God has taught us that it's actually mercy that will win out in the end. Mercy triumphs over judgment. We see Matthew quoting Jesus as saying, "Be perfect as your Father is perfect." It's in the Sermon on the Mount. Be perfect as your Father is perfect. But if you read that in the Gospel of Luke, it's a little bit different. Luke chooses a different word. He says, "Be merciful as your Father in heaven is merciful." That's in Luke 6:36. So Luke's Sermon on the Plain, which is the same idea as the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, is quoted a little bit differently. And I think that's helpful. It's even purposeful. The authors choose different words there. Jesus is said to refer to perfection in Matthew's gospel, but in Luke's, it's mercy. As if to say Luke defines what the perfection of God is. It's God's mercy on display. If you want to know how to be perfect like God, the closest we will come is mercy. Mercy. The word in Matthew is telos. Telos is the goal. It's the end goal of life. It's the ultimate goal. That's what the word telos means. And so in Koine Greek, Matthew is saying the goal of life is to be like God. And Luke clarifies the goal is mercy. If you want to be like God, you have to be merciful. That's how you imitate God. We know we can't be perfect. At least I hope you've heard this by now. You can't be perfect in the moralistic sense. Sinless perfection. Now, there are some extreme branches of holiness movements in the church that are trying to be truly perfect. We're not really like that. We understand you're not going to be perfect. We're not trying to set the bar at an unreasonable level. We do think you should always be working toward perfection. But I don't think any of us believe we're going to achieve that kind of perfection in this earthly life. So what we do aim for, according to Luke's translation, is mercy. You may never be sinless or morally perfect, but you can practice God's mercy. That's what I want to talk about this morning. So I'm going to turn to Matthew 25. which is our key text. And I want you to consider how you can be merciful, how the apostles and Jesus all taught that we have to practice the mercy of God, and that holiness, according to biblical definition, to be set apart like God, holiness is by nature merciful. I'll make this point today. Maybe this is my thesis. A holiness that lacks mercy is no holiness at all. If you have not learned the art of mercy, then you don't really know God. That might be one of the boldest things I've said up here, but I believe it. Matthew 25, I think, elucidates that for us. Beginning in verse 31, this is Jesus speaking. I'll read through the end of the chapter. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he'll separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he'll place the sheep on his right, but the goats on his left. And then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." And then the righteous will answer Jesus, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come and visit you?" So they're like, "Jesus, we didn't do any of this." And he says, truly, actually it says, the king will answer them, which I think is also a nice little Matthean theme there. Matthew's always emphasizing the kingship of Jesus. He says, the king will answer them, "Truly, I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did it to me." Then he'll say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you cursed ones, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For when I was hungry, you gave me no food. I was thirsty, you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, you didn't welcome me. I was naked, you didn't give me clothes. I was sick and in prison, you never visited me." And they'll also answer, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and not minister to you?" Then he'll answer them, saying, "Truly I say to you, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me." And these will go away into the punishment of the age to come, but the righteous into the life of the age to come. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Jesus' parable of the sheep and the goats paints a vivid picture of final judgment. In fact, it's one of the clearest pictures we see in Scripture of final judgment. We don't talk enough about it, if I'm being honest. We see the Son of Man, later referred to as the King, there's no doubt this is Jesus, sitting on the throne, separating people based on their acts of mercy. What have they done to the least of these? How have they treated those mice if they were in the situation a lion? How have they helped others? What strikes me is Jesus doesn't ask what we assume he would ask. Did you have correct doctrine? Did you believe the right things about me? Did you attend the proper church or go through the proper motions to be accepted? He doesn't say, did you serve enough or lead a good ministry or reach enough lost souls or save enough people, witness to enough people, give enough money, offer enough hours to the church or to the community. He doesn't say, did you achieve success or prominence in this world? Did you do great things in my name? Did you perform miracles or cast out demons or do anything extraordinary at all? Did you do anything to prove how great you are? He doesn't ask anything like that. Instead, he says, did you feed hungry people and clothe the people who were cold and naked? Did you give them water when they were thirsty? Did you visit them when they were lonely and isolated? Did you extend mercy to the people in your life? That's the question of final judgment. Whether we like it or not, whether it fits in your theological box or not, I don't frankly care because Jesus himself said it. And so I have to take it at face value. What he is most concerned about on that final day is mercy. Because if you really know Jesus, then you know mercy. And if you have known the mercy of God, you will not be able to help yourself but to share mercy with other people. It's inevitable. In fact, it's a radical truth that Jesus identifies so deeply with the marginalized, the poor, the destitute, the hungry, the naked, the hurting, the isolated, the depressed, the sad, the fearful, the lonely, those on the periphery of society, those on the outside looking in. You define them however you want to. Whatever these people are, whoever they are, Jesus identifies with them so deeply throughout Scripture that he says to help them is to help Christ himself. And by way of that truth, to ignore them is to ignore Jesus himself. It's heavy stuff. Our faith, then, pisteo, pistes, that Greek word I tell you about a lot, faith, which is better translated faithfulness, or it's a fiduciary word, it's a financial term. It refers to loyalty and trustworthiness. That's what it means. That faith is not really so much what you believe or don't believe about someone or something, but rather how those beliefs are translated into your merciful actions. How do you treat those who are in need, those who are hurting? How does your belief translate into kindness and acts of mercy? And I want to tell you why I think this is so important to Jesus. Jesus is, of course, recapturing, redemonstrating, maybe even just reclaiming what we call in theology the imago Dei, which is Latin for the image of God. The image of God. Now, we know that term from Genesis. In the very beginning, it says that God made dust bodies. He made bodies out of dust, and he breathed his ruach, his spirit, breath, wind, spirit. He breathed that into these dust bodies and brought them to life and made them what is called in Hebrew nephesh, living soul, a living soul, by breathing his spirit into this body. But the Bible doesn't stop there. It says when he did this, when he breathed his own spirit into this dust body and brought it to life, it implanted in that body God's own image. And he defines it that way. He says, I'll make these people, these humans, male and female, I'll make them in the image of God, in my own image. And that's where that concept comes from. From the very beginning, God says, you will be my image bearers. That isn't just a term of importance, although I think it is. I think humans are the pinnacle of the created order. I think we're still, at least for now, lesser than the angels and certainly far lesser than God. But I think in created order, we are the great stewards of all that God has made. We're the pinnacle of his creation. That's a blessing. But that's not all it means. It doesn't just mean you're important and that the people around you are important. It means you have a vocation. If you think of a vocation or a job, it means something you're meant to do. Your imago Dei, the image of God born in every single one of you, is a purpose, a job to be done. You represent God to this world, not just as stewards over it, but as members of it. As people in the world, you are figures of God. That's why Paul speaks of Christ in me. He says, whatever I do, it's not me doing it, it's Christ in me doing it. God is at work through me. He realizes he's like an ambassador for God. He represents God to the cosmos, to the world around him. You, like the Apostle Paul, like Jesus himself, you, through the Spirit of God, represent God to every person you come into contact with. Again, that's a heavy burden to bear. And Jesus says, let me help you carry that yoke. I know it sounds like a lot, but I will help you do it. My yoke will be easy. My burden is light. Let me help you. All it takes is love and mercy. You can represent God in this world if you practice faithful love and mercy. This will honor Jesus. And so it's really not that complicated. So we see it in Genesis. Jesus comes and reclaims that image and says, this is what the true human is supposed to look like. One of my favorite moments in the entire gospel story is when Pontius Pilate, the prefect of Rome, or procurator, there's some debate there, but some kind of governor over Judea, when he, representing Caesar, calls forth Jesus to the stand at this goofy trial, mock of a trial, and they bring him up there, I should say mockery of a trial. They bring him up there in front of the crowds, and Pilate says those infamous words, here is the man, ha'anthropon, here's the man. He's saying here is what human is supposed to be. He doesn't even know what he's really saying, but Pilate has declared before the crowds, as a Gentile, he has told a crowd of Jewish people, this is what humans are supposed to be like. It's a pretty loaded statement, but it is so important at a theological level. Jesus is true human. Wherever Adam and Eve failed, Jesus upholds the standard. Whatever human is supposed to be, Jesus is it. And so if we want to model ourselves as image bearers of God, we have to model ourselves after the one who is God enrobed in flesh, God who has pitched his tent with humanity, the God that we celebrate every year in the Advent season, who comes to dwell with us in earthly form, the one who put on a human body and was born in a manger in Bethlehem, namely Jesus, the Nazarene. He is the embodiment of God. He is the image of God, the God, as the New Testament tells us, who is invisible, and yet in Christ is made visible. We see God in Jesus. Now that's already cool enough, but then Jesus says, as my disciples, you people, all of you, I'm talking to you, you now have to show people God. As Jesus was the image bearer of God, he invites you to follow him and be image bearers of God. What a cool thought. It's not unlike what Romans used to do in that day and age. And I think it's why it's a theme found in the New Testament. If you know anything about ancient Rome, you know that emperors were eventually worshipped by a thing called the imperial cult. They were treated like gods. This would be around the time of the Apostle Paul and those who succeeded him in church leadership, those first couple of centuries of the early church. There were Roman emperors who were kings, but they believed themselves to be deity. They thought they were God, or at least they wanted to be treated like gods. And so they created more and more elaborate statues and cult worship at temples dedicated to the king, to the emperor. It was really a weird thing, but it took over in the Mediterranean world. And this imperial cult was in stark contrast to the worship of Jesus, who is the only true Lord and King. And so the church was persecuted early on for not bowing to an emperor and instead bowing to Jesus. Well, you might wonder, how do these people all know who the emperor is? They didn't have TV. They didn't have newspapers and things like we have today. How are all these people aware of who they were supposed to be worshiping? Well, as you've probably seen throughout History Channel or pictures in books or whatever, they made statues, big elaborate statues, and they placed them in all the provinces around ancient Rome. In fact, most of the statues we have any access to today, the statues that still remain, are from all other places besides Rome. We hardly have any evidence of Roman statues that came out of Rome, the city, but we see them from Spain, modern-day Spain, from modern-day Mediterranean world all around the Asia Minor district where you would think of today as Turkey. So Ephesus and Pergamum and Smyrna and all those cities mentioned in the Bible, all of those places had temples with statues of the emperors to be worshipped. But we hardly have any in Rome. And that's because in Rome, you could see the real emperor. He was there. He paraded himself around town and made sure you knew who he was. But he couldn't be everywhere all the time, so he made statues, representatives that people could see and know this is the emperor we're meant to worship. The Bible takes that theme and plays on it with Christ and says, you are now, in a sense, the provincial statues of God. God, who is in the heavenly place, has made you his little statues all over the world so people know what he looks like, so they know what he is like, and so that they will rightly worship him. Again, it's a heavy calling. It's a vocation. To be an image bearer of God isn't just a matter of importance and dignity, although it is. You are inherently meaningful. Your existence matters. Each one of you only exists because God wanted his image in you. That is a beautiful thought, just that on its own. You are inherently dignified, valued, important, meaningful. Your life matters. And I want you to hear that, especially in the holiday season when it can be a little depressing for some people. You matter. But it's more than that. You have a job to do. You represent God to the world that is all around you. So with that in mind, I want to continue through Scripture. Jesus says in Matthew 5:7, blessed are the merciful. This is in the Beatitudes. He's naming all these people that you don't really think of as being blessed by God, and yet he says they are. One of them are the merciful. Blessed are the merciful. But my favorite is the second half. Why are they blessed? The merciful are blessed because they will receive mercy. Those who have shown mercy will be shown mercy. God says, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Galatians 6:9, the Apostle Paul reminds us to not become weary in doing good. Literally showing kindness, doing what is right, doing what is merciful. Because at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. All these verses, all the things we've read so far, remind us, assure us that God sees every act of kindness, every little good deed you perform to another, for another. God sees it. He values it. He wants to see it. He's commanded it of you. Nothing is wasted. The challenge is this: Showing mercy, it's not always convenient or easy or even rewarding in the moment. In fact, that's the whole point of the lion and the mouse. The lion sees the mouse, he's a nuisance to the lion, and his instinct is to get rid of him, get rid of the problem. But he turns for a moment to humor himself and thinks, I'll let him go, but not because I'm going to get anything in return. He's fully convinced a mouse could never do anything to help him. Now the mouse says, hey, show me some kindness, I'll show you some kindness. Tit for tat, let's be nice here. You pat my back, I'll pat yours. But the lion thinks that's funny. He's like, you couldn't do anything for me. Now he's wrong, but I want you to understand in that moment, he doesn't know that he's wrong. He really believes that this mouse could never do anything for him. And so he shows him mercy despite a lack of possible reward. That's significant because mercy by nature has to be no strings attached. I think that's a phrase we would use. You can't do something out of kindness hoping to get something back for it. Isn't that the point of Christmas season? Isn't that the whole point of the figure of Santa Claus? Is that there's this giving without anything in return? I don't get anything back from you. I just give because I love you and I want to give to you. This whole season of the year is all about that, giving without trying to take. Now, some of us don't understand that, especially some kids, but you're supposed to, right? You're supposed to be learning the beauty of giving and not taking, not receiving. I think that's so important. Mercy may not be convenient or easy or cheap, but it also doesn't come with any automatic reward. If I give because I'm going to get, that's an ulterior motive. That's not true mercy. And Jesus, of course, gave without expecting anything in return. So, how can we apply mercy? I do have a few actual points this morning. I'm not just going to ramble. Okay, 3 points. First of all, see people with the eyes of Jesus. So if you want to show mercy today, tomorrow, this week, next week, the year ahead, if you want to be a person who demonstrates the mercy of God, step one, learn to see the world through God's lens. See people the way Jesus sees people. The lion in Aesop's fable could have dismissed the mouse as insignificant. He almost did. We often do the same with people in our own lives who seem too small, too broken, too far outside our own circle. I want you to ask yourself every day when you meet people, how would Jesus view this person? Whoever that person is. How would Jesus see them? That's an important question. How would Jesus see this person in my life? What if we asked that about every person we come into contact with? What a radical difference that could make. And if Jesus sees himself in the least of these, so should we. So we should see Jesus most plainly in the people who are seemingly little, broken, insignificant, marginalized, doing without, hurting, isolated, depressed, lonely. Those are the people we should most quickly and readily see Jesus in. And thus we help them, we love them, we show them mercy. Not out of pity, but out of genuine care. So I wonder if there's anyone in your life that you've been too quick to judge or dismiss or overlook. Either because it was too much trouble, didn't seem like it was going to pay off in the end, didn't think you'd really be able to do much to help them. I don't know. Whatever the reason, are there people that you could have extended mercy to in your life and you haven't for whatever reason? Start by seeing them differently. Begin to see them the way Jesus would see them. Second point is then do small acts of kindness all the time, every day. Do little acts of kindness. Kindness, it really isn't grand or showy most of the time. Now, you could do something really grandiose for a person, and that's wonderful. But most of the time, when we show mercy, it's in the little things. It's not a big ask. Offering a smile and a kind word of encouragement, writing a letter, sending a text, making the phone call, stopping for more than a moment to really talk to a person and show them that you care and that you're listening, that you value them. Maybe you carry around extra granola bars and water bottles in the back seat of your car, just in case you see someone in need, and you can give them a snack and a bottle of water. I know many people are worried of enabling addiction with giving cash gifts, which is a legitimate concern, especially in rural Appalachia. Some of you know I did my dissertation work on trauma related to drug use and families and friends of addicts. I'm passionate about that, and I don't want you to just give cash out to random people, especially if they are currently, looking for the wrong substances to cope with. But you know what you can give anybody, and it would be a good gift? A healthy snack and a bottle of water. So have some of that. Just keep that in your, what if all of you went home today and just kept a pack of water bottles and a bag full of healthy snacks in your trunk, and at any time you would be able to give someone food and water? Well, what a little thing, and yet could really help someone and show kindness and love. I don't know, you be creative. I don't have any other ideas, but think of some other ones, okay? You're better than me at this. Think of good stuff. I'm selfish, but I know you guys. You are good people. Think of the ways to help and serve and love and show mercy and kindness. But just take those little baby steps every day. And then finally, trust God with the results. Sometimes we hesitate to show mercy because we don't see immediate results, or we see the wrong kind of result, and we think, oh no, I have wasted my effort, or this wasn't received well, or it isn't what I intended. And we give up, and we stop being merciful because of one bad experience or one misunderstood turnout. The results are not yours to judge. Mercy is like a seed that you plant. Every act of mercy is just one more little seed you toss out. And I don't know what's going to happen to all those seeds, but the more you toss, the more might grow and become something healthy and fruitful. I don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. So plant the seeds and let God bring the harvest. Trust God to do his work. Scripture assures us that our kindness, whatever happens, it's not wasted. It is never wasted. Be merciful, for the Lord your God is merciful. So I thought of some examples, one from the Bible and then one from more recent history. The first one's Rahab. How many of you are familiar with Rahab? No, I said I wasn't going to do raising hands, and people keep making fun of me for it, so we're not going to do it. Don't raise your hands. But I bet you know who Rahab is in the Bible. In the book of Joshua, we meet a woman named Rahab. She's a Canaanite woman. She lives in Jericho, this fortified city. The Israelites send in a couple of spies, and this woman, she runs a home, what we might call a home of ill repute, okay? You know, basically she might be running a brothel. That's the implication. So she's not seen as a righteous, upstanding woman. She's not a Jewish woman. She's a Gentile. But for some reason, and there's no background, no explanation, but for some reason, whether prophetically or otherwise, she understands the God of Israel, who he is, and she believes that God is going to take the city of Jericho for his people. I can't tell you how she knows that, but she says when she meets these spies, I know that your God, the Lord, is handing this city over to you. And so she hides the spies on her rooftop. The soldiers look for them. They can't find them. They escape out of a hatch. Then they come back later. They do seize the city of Jericho. It's a famous story. And Rahab and her family are spared. But it's more than that, because Rahab, a random Gentile woman of ill repute, ends up being named in the Christmas story as a great-great-grandmother of Jesus Christ. What a bizarre turn of events. Her one act of kindness centuries prior lead to her inclusion in the genealogy of Jesus. Little acts of mercy. You have no idea what difference they might make. The ripple effects for hundreds of years in this case. That's a biblical example. I believe it's true, but there's another example I know is historically founded, and I know it's true, and I want to share that with you because I just think it's a really good story. If you've not seen a movie about it, I know there's at least one good movie with Liam Neeson, but it's about Oskar Schindler. Anybody heard of, you just nod your heads. Anybody heard of Schindler? Schindler's List, I think is the name of the movie. Okay, I want to talk about him for a second. Maybe. Schindler wasn't exactly a model of virtue when World War II began. He was a German businessman. He was a member of the Nazi Party. And initially, he was just focused on making money and profits. But as he slowly witnessed the horrors and atrocities of the Holocaust and the rise of Nazi influence, he felt conviction in his soul. And he felt the need to protect the innocent, those that he knew should not be suffering like this. And so he began to hire almost exclusively Jewish workers in his factory. And he spent his fortune over the next years protecting them, bribing Nazi officials, providing the things they needed for their day-to-day lives. I don't know that he went bankrupt, but he spent a lot of what could have been pocketable profit. He turned all that overhead, all that profit back into their pockets and kept them alive and healthy and safe. And eventually, it's believed he saved over 1,200 people from what might have been death or at least imprisonment in internment camps during the Holocaust. What a crazy thing. And that's a real story from real history, and we should talk more about it. It's amazing, amazing. His act of kindness in one place, in one time in history, is now believed to have produced generationally, just since the 1940s and the World War II era to today, it's believed tens of thousands of people now are alive as direct descendants and family members of those 1,200 plus people that he saved. Think about that. Not just the people he saved, but all the people who have been born since, connected through their lineage, kind of like Rahab with Jesus. We don't understand the value of our acts of mercy in the way that God sees the big picture. But God uses it. He always uses it. And of course, Oskar Schindler becomes a picture of righteousness, someone who turned against his own background and chose a better path, namely the path of mercy. It's good stories. There's so many good stories. I mean, I just picked a couple, but there are so many good stories. Just as the lion discovered that his act of mercy returned to him in an hour of need, so too Jesus teaches that our mercy isn't just a duty or a job we have to perform. It is a way that God stays connected to us as his people. It keeps us close to God, and in the end, we will be rewarded for it. We don't do it for the reward. I hope I explained that earlier. You don't show mercy because you're going to get something back from the person. But God is nice enough to remind us, even if it costs you, even if it doesn't pay off in the beginning, I will reward you later. I don't turn a blind eye to your kindness, to your acts of mercy. In some way, it will draw you nearer to God, and you will be blessed for it. Maybe not in the way you expect, but I'm sure in a way far better than you could imagine. Jesus said, whatever you do for the least of these, you do that for me. St. Francis of Assisi said, it is in giving that we receive. And the apostles in the book of Acts quote Jesus that it is better to give than to take. Would you stand with me as we close this morning? When we choose to pour out mercy and kindness in the lives of the people around us, God fills our cup back up with his own mercy and grace. That's the way it works. God fills you up so that you can be poured out as a blessing. You are blessed to bless. Blessed to be a blessing. That's been the story since Genesis, at least Genesis 12, 15, 17, 21. Every time Abraham is spoken of in covenant, it's always a blessed person who then blesses people. That's our call. We are the children of Abraham by faith. We are tasked as the image bearers of God, representatives of God's promise, to be blessed in order to bless. You have received mercy, so show mercy. It is that simple. And there's perhaps no better time of year to think about those things than Christmas time. Be merciful. So who are the least of these in your own life? Before you leave here today, I want you to at least think, who can I show mercy to? How can I do this? Who should I see differently? How can I show daily acts of kindness? How can I learn to trust God with the outcome? What does that look like for you? I want you to really consider that. Will you let God's love flow through you to those who may otherwise not really know it or receive it? Will you be the image bearers of God in a world full of darkness and pain? Will you shine light? Will you bring love? Will you offer mercy? Every act of kindness, no matter how small, becomes part of God's story of redemption. The God who, while we were yet sinners, sent Christ to die for us. When we had nothing to offer him, showed us the deepest level of mercy. He invites you every day to demonstrate that same mercy to other people. Then maybe on that last day, we will hear those comforting words, well done, good and faithful servants. Enter into the rest my Father has prepared for you. My favorite verse again, James 2:13. Judgment is without mercy to one who has shown no mercy, but mercy triumphs over judgment. I want to close with a charge from Jesus himself. Then I'll pray, and then we'll come to the Lord's table. But this is from the mouth of Jesus. He says to his disciples and to some of his naysayers in the crowd, and I believe he says it to us, go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Go and learn. Go and learn.